Hi there, friends. Welcome to our session. It's Monday, so I don't know a better day of the week than to discuss data and analytics. After all, we're fresh from the weekend and ready to contemplate pure hard numbers. So, um, just a little bit of context here, actually, two pieces. First of all, I know that you're very much used to getting data and analytics in a certain way. And it's worked very well for many, I understand. I also understand change can be difficult. Understand that you can absolutely obtain great data and analytics, but it may be packaged differently. It might be in places in Canvas where you don't anticipate. And to be honest, some data might not be easily obtainable, let's put it that way. So just want to manage expectations. Always, it's like moving to a brand new home and you're finding things are a little weird in the house, and we have to get used to how it goes. The second thing I just wanted to bring up here is, strictly speaking, I'm only putting this out there. We do have a full 90 minutes for today, and this is frankly because I was anticipating detailed questions about data. So if you do have them, we have the time to dig in and problem solve and find out where we can find the things. So let's keep that in mind as we go through all the different areas in Canvas where you can find all the things. We're going to start in the course roster. Funny enough, you can find some great data there. We'll also investigate the individual user reports area, which is hiding in another place you don't expect, the profile. We'll also take a look at course level data, and there are several spaces. We've got a course wide area. We've got a student specific area. There's even specific analytics available for quizzes, and we'll dig into that. There are a couple of reports available there, like item analysis. There's also course stats. And Karen can correct me, I know this is available in D2L, but there is a way to track module progression. So have students actually accessed module items. So I'll show you that Canvas equivalent. So all in all, we're going to figure out all these different places in Canvas where you can track progress, track their interactions, and even to track their grades, track their understanding. All right, so we're going to start in the people area. Now, the people area is a place where you get the course roster. Everybody knows that, I think, now at this point. Without accessing anything special, you have some pieces of information available on each student, not on TAs, not on other teachers, but on students. And so what you're able to see here for this student is last time of activity, and then there's a count here of total activity. Let me define activity from a Canvas perspective. When a student is active in Canvas, they have done one of two things. The first possible kind of activity is called page views, and it's what it sounds like. Helen, your student accessed an assignment March the 19th at 11:20 a.m. That's counted as a piece of activity. Is that the greatest activity? No. But it shows that they did access, in this case, the course on this date and time. So I say the course because you're not able to see here what they accessed, just that they were here at some point or at this point. That in and of itself can be helpful. So if you want a overall bird's eye view of student engagement, for example, I need to talk to this student for sure because they have not been in Canvas for a while. And then over here, you see a count of what's called total activity. So this is hours, minutes, seconds. This student has spent about 10 hours in the course being active. Now, I mentioned there's two kinds of activity, right? The second kind of activity would be participations. That's also what it sounds like. That's Helen submitted an assignment. Helen submitted a quiz attempt. Helen submitted a discussion board reply. Helen engaged in a Microsoft collaboration you set up, that kind of thing. So altogether, those bits of data, those bits of interaction are all counted in activity, and the total time for Bruce here anyway is about 10 hours. And that can also be helpful. So I'm comparing here Bruce to this is Yelena. Bruce seems to be far more engaged in the course content than Yelena, which doesn't mean that Yelena is doing poorly. It means that Yelena is spending less time in the course than Bruce. So that's something you can obtain from the people area without doing anything else that's special.
And Helen, those are numbers that are related just to this particular course, not just their access of Canvas overall. This is specific to the course. Is that correct?
Correct. Right. So if this is just for this business class, if I happen to be teaching Bruce in a second class, then he's going to have total and last activity accumulated over there. I have to go over there to see those numbers. That's a great call out. And you're right, it's course by course. Now, there's other pieces of data. Every person inside of the roster is linked. So if you click on the link, you get a little card popping up, and this is called the context card. So right here, you see their info, and I'll skip over these buttons. We'll come back to them. Total grade, missing and late, and then the last graded items with the green bars representing the perfect scores. And then over here, I see activity compared to class. And this is relative. So I'm seeing relative to the class, he's participating a lot and he's looking at resources a lot. Now, I keep this all in context, right? Meaning, yeah, he's active in the course all right. That's for sure. He's got some missing assignments here, and I would think, this gives me pause. He's got two late assignments here. That would give me some pause. Given that his participation and page views seem really high, I would expect his grade to be a little higher. Yeah, higher than 84. So this is why it's called the context card. We put all this information in context. So it seems to me from this data, perhaps he's struggling with content. Maybe there's key concepts he doesn't understand or needs additional reinforcement. All of which means I could even reach out to him. You have an envelope. If you click the envelope, it opens an inbox. And from the inbox, you can send a message and say, hey, notice some things. Can we set up some office hours for you? Over here, too, you see grades as well as their individual analytics, which we'll come back to when we get into that area. But we're going to head into the grades next. Well, that loads up. Let me take a look at this great question. Is active considered? If I log in, forget I did, but walking away, come back in an hour with no activity. So that time that they're away is going to be registered in the account level reports. I don't know if it accumulates time in the course though. Let me see if I can find that out. That's a good question. Mhm. Oh, and I'll fix this while we're doing that. All right, so I'll keep on searching for an appropriate resource for you. Let's see. Oh, I might have found it actually. course analytics. Okay, I'm not seeing information on it currently, but I'm going to keep on looking here while I show you the grades area. That's a great question, though. So I have the community kind of up here. All right. Another area where you can access data in the course is obviously the student grades list. Even as an instructor, and this would be true despite admin rights. If I was a regular instructor with no other special powers, you can still access what the student sees on their grades list for this course. Obviously not for others. Now, a common question I remember getting from faculty, right? Your faculty, great question. How do I know that they're looking at this page? Um, you can access that information probably from course analytics, which we're going to head into pretty soon. Um, but if it comes to things like, for example, you see here, Bruce had 3 feedback comments. You wouldn't be able to tell from here if he looked at them. Uh, and from the student perspective, so that you know, if a student has not looked at something like a grade, rubric scores, feedback scores, there would be a blue dot here. But the appearance of that blue dot is student specific, so you can't see from your vantage point if he looked at the feedback or not. Um, some instructors I know require that their students answer back to feedback. And that could be like a workaround for you. So students can click on their comments right here, for example, and they'll have a little window pop up. Yep, similar to this, where they can add their own comment here. And so I'm thinking if you require that, then you can see for sure if they actually looked at it, because they would have to click on it to see your feedback. So other things you can see here include, due date, when it was submitted, things like a late status, missing status would also be shown here.
Helen, can we get some clarification on something because I wanted to answer it, but I wasn't quite sure. So Kevin posed a question: is active considered if he logs in and he walks away from the computer with
Mhm.
no activity? What will the time show? I know in D2L you can see a green light next to their name saying they're actively logged in. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're
Oh,
doing anything.
right, but they're logged in.
All right, so is active, does that mean they're just in the course, not necessarily doing anything, or are they actively looking at a page or doing something like that?
So this says here allows you to see how long users interact within a course. So you have to be in the course clicking around. That's what that tells me. And counts page navigation only.
All right, so just actively in a page somewhere.
Right. Total activity records time spent viewing course content that exceeds 2 minutes. So they have to sit on a page for 2 minutes or
Okay.
more for the 2 minutes or more to be counted. So it
Okay,
looks
so
like if
my,
they
I'm
sit.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it seems to me like if they just sit on Kevin's homepage for like, let's say 3 minutes, then the 3 minutes would be counted. That's what.
Okay. What if it was for 45 minutes? As long as they're logged in, just in the course, that's what I'm trying to make sure. So as long as they're in the course somewhere, it's going to count as activity. Okay.
And as
Kevin, I hope
far
that answers
as
your question.
as I said, as far as we know, there are no other indicators if a student is actively in a course in Canvas and logged in at the moment. So when I think about the green dot, it's sort of like the availability dot in Teams or Zoom or
Mm,
things like that. We don't. There are no indicators if a student is currently logged in. It would be just the last activity.
Right.
yeah.
Not from the instructor side anyway. From the admin side, yeah.
Well, to an extent.
Yeah.
So hopefully, as things as time goes by, I guess we're hoping to see more granular things of they accessed this piece of content for this long, and I know that there is some of that, but it's definitely not as granular as you would get in D2L with this. So hopefully, in the future, we can get some more of that.
It's true. Lauren, thanks so much for finding that page. I was struggling a little bit. All right. Oh, yes, we were in grades. I'm sorry. So, other things you can see here, if you take a look, say, at this area, there are little buttons that can be accessed. The first button here can be controlled, as in its presence can be controlled by a course setting. So, before I show you that, I just want to show you where the setting is. That little checkbox icon lets you view overall course statistics related to achievement on that assignment. So to enable that, right, while you can always see it, you can choose to hide it completely from students. Sometimes people don't want students to see that stuff. So if that's you, you can hide it. Otherwise, if you uncheck it, students will also have access to the grade distribution graphs. So you can control if students can see it, but you will always be able to see those stats. So moving on back to grades. And sorry, I should have gone to Bruce here. So if you locate that particular checkbox, oh, that clicked on the wrong thing. Let's try that again. There we go. So it lives right here. If you select on that checkbox, you can see mean and median, high and low, upper and lower quartile. I picked the wrong one, I see. These little clear squares here would indicate the range of scores, and then the blue square is Bruce. So you can see where he lands in the spread of the scores. And you can kind of see there in gray, right, his total score, right, 40 out of 50. Now there's also here a little clipboard icon. The clipboard icon lets you and students see their rubric scores plus any comments that are added for each indicator. And then right here is a way that students can see their feedback, including video feedback, audio feedback. Now, the very top here, Bruce can see his overall grade, and he can click on Show All Details to see if he's allowed to, right? The statistics for each assignment. And then at the very bottom of this screen, I'll try to scroll really quickly. There will be a kind of allocation of where the points come from. So he has 177 out of 216 points with this average in this category. And then the total grade lives here with the equivalent registered in points available. All right, so this, unfortunately, again, you can't see if the students have seen that feedback, but you can at least see their grade screen. And if students are expressing issues, like I can't see my grades, there is a print grades feature that's available to you where you can even save this and send this to the student. All right, so that's the grades area. Moving on from the people space, because that's where we started, I want to show you here some individual and then some class-specific reports that live here. And again, you'd never know it unless you didn't have this session. So let's go ahead and take a look at individual reports. Again, you'd click on the student name, and this time we're going to go to the link for the student's name right here. Now, no need to scroll down on this page because the reports I'm speaking of are apparent in the top right-hand corner. I'll just define what this report is, then move away because in the current time, MTSU is not using this Canvas feature called outcomes. But I will just define so that you know an outcomes report would list the student's mastery of learning competencies that are tied to rubrics that are used to grade students. So that's what that is. Other reports you see here, again, another way to get into grades, as well as two other reports I think you might find interesting. The first is interactions. Now, to manage expectations, Bruce is a fake student in all of my classes, so you see a lot of tables. For you, you would expect to see just one table for the student, and the name of your course would be here. So you see here a link to the student, which would bring you back to the profile. And then you see something called last student interaction. So an interaction as defined by Canvas means one of two things. It means there was a comment in SpeedGrader, when the student, submitted a comment or when you submitted a comment. It can also mean an inbox message. And then you see here two fields, right? Let me try to find one that's a little more illustrative. Oh, this one will work. Where you see a current score and then a final score. Now, it can be interesting to see these scores at different times of the semester. Right at the beginning of the semester, when students are fired with energy and motivation, their current scores at that time might be really high because they've just completed one or two assignments. So at that time, you'd expect the current score to be high, but the final score would be really, really low. And that's because the final score pretends we have zeros for every assignment after that. So it's as if the student quits and no more grades are registered for that student. So at the beginning of the semester, yes, you'd see a giant gap, but it's not necessarily cause for alarm. At the end of the semester, that would be a cause for alarm, yeah, because we're wanting the current and final scores to be much closer. Now, there are a couple of reasons why they might not be so close at the end of the semester. One really is that the student is struggling and is in need of support and intervention, and they have not submitted what they're supposed to. But another reason is that you might be behind on grading. And that's the reason why you have a list of ungraded assignments. So it's to alert you, hey, it might be because you need to grade these. So you're offered a link to those assignments. And if you want to reach out to the student about it, there's an envelope for that purpose. Now, this is for this course, right? And just the student. If you wanted to see the full report for the entire course, you would go to that link here. And you'll get a comparable table, kind of like this, where you could go straight to that, what this is called the class interaction report. You can message those individual students here, right? And you see at a glance like what everybody's current and final score is. So you have an individual report, and then you have a course-wide report. And there's one other way into the course-wide report, which is not in the user profile. It's back in people, where if you go to the three dots in the corner, your student interactions report lives here. So here is that interactions report for my business class right here. All right. Let me pause here. Any questions for you? Or new questions, rather? All right. Let's head on back to Bruce here. Again, we're going inside his profile to see these reports. Now, if you remember in the people area, I saw Bruce's last activity was March 19th at, I think it was 12:30, something like that. But I pointed out at the time you couldn't tell exactly what he was looking at. Well, I think in the access report, you can find that information. So I go here to access report. And I try to find either I try to find last viewed because that's most likely that area. So right here, I can see he viewed his course grades March 19th at 10:20, and that's the reason for his recent activity. Also, that's proof he looked at his grades, right? Right. Now they're listed in that most recent activity at the top. And then for anything that is an assignment, you'll see a times participated. Uh, I don't know why these are decimals because these represent submissions. So this means there was one submission, there were two submissions, five submissions, and then total times viewed. And so you can kind of scroll up and down here and see exactly what he was looking at. So at least I can tell what he was looking at that last viewed date. But you also notice here a couple of things. Like, for example, I can't order the list, so I can't see, unless I scrolled, which item he's looking at the most. Although, pretty good guess here. He's looking at the home page the most. You also notice that the content is pretty granular. This is a course banner. I would have to know the name of the banner to indicate that. Also, that's being counted, looks like multiple times because that's the course banner, but that's the home page where the banner is, right? So the course homepage with that written content and links on it counts, and also the banner counts. Oh, the little arrow right here, that's a good question. This means this is a file. So that's a file assignment. That's a link. That's a special symbol I think we use for modules specifically. Great question. All right, so that's the individual access report. So at least I can drill down and see where he was at, the last time where it said last activity. However, there's not an easy way to get a course access report. I think there's a comparable report, but I don't think it's quite the same, which I'll show you where that is momentarily. All right, so that's what's available in user reports. Well, let's take a look at course analytics. So you saw me just click on that link to access it here. And I know because you've been attending trainings and you're very smart people anyway, but it looks like it's available to students. It's not. It's one of those things that is actually hidden. It looks like it's available, but it's not. Another way to get to course analytics is to go from the home page. So just to show you, if you couldn't find it here for some reason, there's a course analytics button right here. So same place. So I'm brought here to this space, and I get course grade by default with some, a scatter plot here, which tells me the average on that assignment across all students that's submitted. And I also see the average course grade for all. And if I click on a dot, I have here the title, the due date, and then a distribution graph. And if you hover over each bar, you can see, X number of students got within that grade range. And if you click on the bar, you can see who they were. That's nice. But notice you're not told what exactly the grade was. You also see average, low and high. And then right here, you see missing and late. And they are links, right? They're links because they're a call to action for you. Because if I click on this link here for the four people, I see who have it missing. And there's an envelope. Get used to seeing the envelope frequently. The envelope always means I can send people a message. And in this case, I can send one message to all four students, letting them know of my concerns, letting them know they can come see me for support. and then a way, to go ahead and send that to their inbox messages, mess to send them an inbox message, excuse me. By the way, this is a blind carbon copy, so they're not going to know who else got the message, but you can see who they are. Now, there's a comparable way for you to send messages to the students who have it late. There's even a comparable area where you can send messages to students scoring in a certain range. And just telling you a short anecdote here, I found this really helpful for bubble students. You know, those students that they're trying really hard, they are, but they know they're just on the edge. And it can be unique to try to reach those students. So if we set a range of, say, like, 60 to 80, let's say, Canvas will let you know who they are because you can click on the link to know who they are. And then you can send them a message to encourage them, right? Give them their due, ask them to come in for tutoring. So it's great that you can send these targeted messages. All right, so here on your scatter plot, you can see some interesting trends. And I know your courses will be very busy, so if you want to cut down on some of the clutter, you can. So I'm going to remove discussions and quizzes so I can see just assignments. And the data here is for all students in the course. Let's say I wanted to compare everybody to a specific student. And so know that they're color coded so that this is for this student here. So this is her achievement, and then this was the achievement of the class. And if you click on the students dot, you can see what that grade was and the status of it. So status could be missing, late is another one, excused is another one, also on time. You can even compare students to each other if you want. You can also send yet another message. In this case, this is for the entire course, like the course grade. So if I wanted to message students that had a course grade between 60 and 80, right, I could. And then for anyone who has anything late, for anyone who has anything late or missing here. You can download this information too in a spreadsheet. And right over here is I think an interesting option. This display is what's called a display table, but there's also our shapes, but there's also a data table. So you get the same information, it's just not in this scatter plot format. And if you select on the link, you get the same distribution graph you saw before. So that's what's available on the course grade page. And there's a lot more to investigate, but any questions that have come up since the last time? Okay. So moving on here. Now, course grade is an obvious cue to their academic achievement. But if I'm wanting to know about what are students doing in the course, so I'm more interested in engagement with course resources and activities, then you want to check out weekly online activity. Now you're seeing the data table. I'm going to choose display shapes because I like that better. But in a weekly online activity, there we are. We see some interesting graphs, some great trends over time. So if you hover over them, let's do this dot. I can see average page views, and this is total page views, I'm sorry. If you click on the dot, this is for page views. You can see in that week, I'm saying week asterisk week, total numbers of folks that viewed something and didn't view something, who participated and didn't participate in something. Now, this is a powerful way to encourage participation because When I click on the number, you can find out who they are because they'll be linked here, right? You can get their names and you can send them a message. Now, this is for the general area. I'll show you, you can get a targeted one here in a minute. So again, you send them a message and let them know, I noticed you didn't submit something. Can we have a conversation? The same thing goes for if students who didn't view something. Now moving down here, and like mind you, this is for just a certain week, right, in the course. You can see and have a pretty good guess who they are, right? So two students had a lot of page views and participations that none of the others did. If you want, you can reorder the list. There we are. And you can do the same for participations. So this lets you know who those students are, right? And then right here, you have resources. Since we know that it's two students, we know what they looked at. They were on the home page. They were on modules. One of them was on this discussion. But notice it doesn't tell you which student, right? So you'd have to look at their individual analytics and see if you can figure that out. As a matter of fact, there's the access report, right? You could go to the access report and see if you can find it. Okay, so that's for the page views. You get something comparable for the participation area. Now, if you're wondering about these trends, is this typical? These students are fake, so my data is a little different. You're going to notice yourself that you will naturally have very high levels of page views at the start of the course. Be aware, like I know your students love you, but there will be a natural decline in page views over the semester. And then they tend to peak again at the end of the semester because of final projects and things like that. So overall, right, you can get a good sense as to weekly engagement, but it's more tricky to find out, like, for example, can you find out if Helen was on a certain discussion on Tuesday, right? Which I think that kind of thing you can get in D2L. I think you'd have to go to the access report for that. And that would be for the individual student, right? So if I have to go check up on Karen, I have to go to Karen's report. All right, let me stop here because I know there's a lot of numbers being thrown about. Any questions about anything that you're seeing here?
I actually kind of forgot to ask, how often are these stats updated? Are these live or do they do an overnight update?
That's a good question. These pull from a data pool called a Data 2, Canvas Data 2. I believe the refresh rate is about every 8 hours. Also, you need to know that at the very start of the semester, if you log into this area on the first day of class, you most likely won't see anything, right? Because nobody has entered the class. Also, it can take up to 24 hours for the first data to come in. So don't expect to see too much here on the first, maybe the second day of class. I would check this starting on the third day. Course analytics useful for grading. Yeah, if you're this discussions question has come up. Specifically for discussions, there is no comparable Canvas discussions overview. If you're looking for things like, I want to encourage these students who have not submitted their discussion posts. Uh, I think the closest way to do that is to go into grades and to do a message students who. Because in Message Students Who, it would send a targeted message to just the 8 students that didn't submit a discussion post. So just to show you here, right? Like in grades, for instance, and I'll pick a discussion. right? These students who have it missing, right, are marked here in red, and in the three dots, I can send those students a message to let them know that they need to get busy. And then when you grade the discussion, it's easy to see who submitted the posts and who did not. So you could even create a rubric and have in the rubric a criterion that indicates did you do your discussion post or not. It'd be easy to see in SpeedGrader if they have. I don't know if that answered your question though, Vicky, but um, no, it's not as granular as that in Canvas. So there's not a comparable Canvas dashboard for discussion overview, is what I'm trying to say. Of course you do. I'm sure you do. I didn't mean to say otherwise. Yeah, I can't think of a way to get, say, if I want to see in a like, discussion X, like I want to see that there were 100 posts and there were 25 responses to classmates. No, that kind of thing is not possible to see. Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. But in Canvas anyway, you have a grade for each discussion, right? You could simply use the rubric to grade for compliance to see if they did do their three replies by X date. And if you use the discussion checkpoints feature, you can mandate a due date by which they have to submit their replies. All right. So let's X out of here and come back. Hopefully more analytics of that nature will be developed soon. Like I get that question a lot. So back to weekly online activity here. Now below the graph, the scatter graph, you see a list of resources. So you can get a kind of at a bird's eye glance what items students are looking at the most. And kind of a spoiler alert, it's almost always the homepage or modules or both. So that's not uncommon. Again, like with the resource specific view, you can reorder the list in a number of ways. You can also compare weekly online activity. So if you're really concerned about, like I'm concerned about Jeff, for example, right? Oh, I mean, this is really obvious. Like Jeff is not very engaged inside the course relative to the others. And again, you have ways to message students, download the information, or view this in the data table format. Next here, you have students. And let me X out Jeff here for a minute. So you see a complete list of all of your students here, along with their grade as well as percent on time. I don't know of any other place in Canvas where you can get this number right off the bat at the instructor level. But you can see right away these students are experiencing some motivation issues. There's also last participation, last page view, and then those totals. You might find last participation to be helpful if you have to submit information for financial aid, right? Because it lets you know the last time they did something in the course, right? And then if you clicked on their name here, you would go straight to their individual analytics, which we'll get to in some moments. But like I said, you can focus on specific students, send a message, download the info, and then reports. So I can get a report for all missing, all late, all excused assignments. And if you click on the I modal, you get a little snapshot of what to expect, right? So this will give you a list of all students who didn't submit assignments, what you think. You can also get, by the way, a class roster. I mean, if you need just a simple list of students to track anything you want, this is a quick way to get it. And then right here, I think the most useful report. This is the total number of times they viewed or participated in that assignment, right? Even you get a sense as to when they first looked at it and when they last viewed it. So this would tell you right away in the spreadsheet the number of times they looked at an assignment, the number of times they submitted the assignment. Now, there's some warnings here, right? Like, for example, course activity. This is really only good for 30 days. So if you're a report aficionado, right? You live and die by your course reports. I would recommend you run this monthly. So the procedure to run the report's pretty easy. I just click on Run Report. Depending on the nature of the report, you might have to institute a filter. So for example, I want you to filter by student name. Maybe I really want a certain student, right? And then I can just run the report. For other kinds of reports like missing, what you see here in the filter might be less. But if you're wondering, this means there's 143 counts of something missing in the course. And again, you just try to filter your report accordingly. So I want to filter by assignment. In this case, I pick the assignment. So a setup like this gets me a list of missings for just this assignment, in which case there's two of them. Or I want a list of all missing assignments for Troy, and then I can get the report. And that's what you can view in Course Analytics. So we're going to move on to user analytics in a sec. Any questions, insights, things you want to go over, things you want to dig into? Okay, well, let's take a look at individual analytics. So there's a number of ways to get here. I think the easiest from here is to click on the student's name. And it brings you to this space. This is the user analytics. There are other ways. For example, I'll come back to this tab. Remember I had mentioned here there's a student context card. There's another way into user analytics right here. You can also access it from the profile too. Now, because it's just for one user, you won't see a richness of data, just their average on each assignment, a way to message them, see this in a data table format, download the info, and then you get his weekly online activity with total counts. So when I click on total page views here, and this is just for Bruce, right? Again, I see in this week what he was looking at. But again, could I get this on the day? No. Now right here is an area I don't think you can access anywhere else in Canvas, and this is a communication log. So right away I see in this course, he hasn't sent me anything, but I've sent him messages. And I will scroll here so I can locate the week within which at least I sent him a message in this week. So if I click on the bar, I can see the number again, but oddly enough, I don't see what the message was. If you're looking for the content of the message, you will have to go to your inbox for that. But since you now have the week, right, you would just search for this course, search for Bruce, look for messages in the week, and I bet you can find it there. So that is the user analytics. Any questions on that before we move on to quizzes? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get to a quiz. So from your new quiz, just to give you some context, right? Usually when you click on a link, you enter the build space, right? Your reports live in this area. And you see here three sections, two of which you can get a spreadsheet for. This one you can't. It's a good question. I don't know why you can't. Um, but again, just to tell you, if you have learning competencies linked to your new quizzes or the quiz questions, you can get a report of which outcomes are shown as having been mastered by each student. Now, that's only relevant if you're using outcomes, first of all. And it's confined to just these quizzes. So you might have assessed those outcomes in projects and assignments. So, and it's not going to include those results just on the quiz questions. As far as quiz and item analysis is concerned, which is the most detailed of the reports, you can start to generate a report once students start to submit, but you generally need about 3 submissions before you can get any data. So don't be like me. Like when students were completing like an exam or a quiz, I'd be sitting there hitting refresh. Just wait for a couple of submissions to come in before you try to access reports. So I see high and low and mean, and if I want to view the report, I click on the link. All right. So here's our quiz. Here's the high, here's the low, here's the mean and median. Mean elapsed time would be the average time it took for a student to submit one submission. And then you'll see here a drop down. That's because there's more statistics hiding under here. Under this area, you see 2 other pieces of stats. You see standard dev and then something called Cronbach's alpha. Standard deviation would be the spread of the scores along the mean, right? And we generally expect to see a pretty big standard deviation for, let's say it's a big semester exam. That's a common one. Cronbach's alpha has to do with internal consistency. It measures something called the reliability of a quiz. And I know you see NA here. You're wondering, what is that? Values should range from 0 to 1. Honestly, for a lot of these scores that we're about to go over, you're looking for a number that's close to +1. +1 generally means you're doing all right. The quiz is doing what it's supposed to. The quiz is measuring student knowledge and skills. Definitely want to look at your quiz more closely if your number is closer to 0. When it comes to Cronbach's alpha anyway, you're looking for a correlation between the items in the quiz. If they're strongly related, the number should be closer to +1. Then you see here score distribution. I know you see these numbers, right? Like 7 students scored in this range, but you're not able to tell who, okay? Just telling you who, that you have this number of students. And then you have here statistics on each question that was given. So for all of these, by the way, you have an information modal. If you click on the eye, you get more information about it. And again, we're looking and hoping for scores that are close to +1. Item difficulty is basically how easy the students found it. It's not how hard it was, it's how easy it was. It's telling you 75% of all students got this question right, which is borne out by this number. You get mean and median here, and then also something called discrimination index. Again, we're looking for -1 to +1. +1 being ideally what we're looking for. See, we're looking for questions that discriminate or tell the difference between students who scored well and students who are struggling. So if you've got a high discrimination index, the question is doing its job. Now, if it comes to scores of zero, that happens sometimes, or even negative scores. Let's talk first about the zeros. It doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong. If I see a zero, you do need to look at the question, but specifically, you need to ask yourself, should you have expected everybody to get it right? So here's a contextual answer to that. As a chemistry instructor, I would expect people coming to me already knowing what an atom is. Like, I shouldn't have to explain that. They should have done that in middle school, high school. So a question like that, that is so simple, that is a definition type of question that they should already know the answer, does not discriminate between students who understand course content and students who don't. Therefore, discrimination index should be zero for those background kinds of questions. So context matters. That's all I'm saying. And then item total correlation coefficient. That's a long description for the relationship between getting this question right and getting a high score on the quiz. This is roughly telling you students who got this question right did well on the quiz, which is what you figure should be happening. And again, you look for the positive numbers. So if you're seeing negatives, I'd say in the end, take a look. If your numbers are close to +1, you can probably move on. Does that make sense? All right. So that is quiz and item analysis. I know quite a lot about it. I have here a cheat sheet. It's available in our community, and you feel free to access that whenever you need to get much more information about quiz analysis. The report you see here for student analysis gives you about the same results, except it's listed by student, uh, whereas this report here lists things by item. Let's take a breath here. I know that was a bit of information. Is there anything you're wondering, anything you want to discuss or bring up, which could be in the context of this or in other things?
So with the quizzes, that is just this question as it exists in this particular quiz. It's not necessarily at the item bank level. So if you use the
Correct.
question in a different course,
Correct.
um, that will go in its own report
Mhm.
elsewhere. Is that correct?
That's correct. Context is everything. You're right. All right. Anything else you want to chew on? All right. Before I leave quiz analysis, I do want to throw in this point for consideration. Um, this may or may not apply to you. I guess I'm going to find out. If you are the sort of person that really finds a lot of value in your quiz statistics, and you like to even compare results on this quiz during this year versus next year versus the year after that, you might be. I would always recommend that you export your CSVs of all of your quizzes and store them. You won't necessarily have access to the quiz statistics after the term is over. So you may want to pick up all of those CSVs of your results and store them somewhere so that you can make these comparisons year over year. All right. So let's go ahead and move on from analytics here. And I want to show you another place in Canvas where it's kind of like the people area where you don't think there should be information, but there is. Oddly enough, it's living in settings. If you go to settings and then you locate right here, course statistics. Again, this is an area of the course students don't have access to. It's just available to you, but you can see things like how many discussions you have, how many assignments you have, active students, how many quizzes you have, how many quiz submissions you have. And then in assignments, you have a usage report, information on the submission type you use the most often. And by the way, this is very common. File upload is probably the most heavily used type of assignment. So if you're thinking, well, what's the utility of this then? Think of this as an opportunity to stretch a bit. So let's say it's a couple of years from now, you want to expand on what you do in Canvas. I could see going into the assignments tab here helpful because it tells me, hey, I don't use discussions that much. Maybe I should, right? The same thing with student annotation. I don't use student annotation that much. Maybe I should. So it gives you a sense as to how you use assignment types to encourage you to do a little stretching once you're in the mood for it. Now, the Students tab here lets you see, I always find this interesting, especially on game night, most recently used logged in users. So sometimes I would be working on Canvas and it was a game night and I would see students are logging in during the game. Interesting. You have here a way to track when students logged in. These are the last four that did. And if you click on their link here, it'll lead you to their profile. But as far as statistics that is truly very specific to the instructor, I think file storage is the most instructive. This lets you know your allotted course storage and the files that are currently occupying that storage. So all in all, this is telling me I've got plenty of room, right? I can add more files. I could maybe even upload a couple of small gigabyte videos to the course. Just keep in mind, right, you do have a limit. So if I found something in the Commons that was 400 megabytes, and there are courses like that, believe me, if you would try to import those items into your course, the import would fail. So this is a good thing to check if you're thinking, I'm going to go into the Commons and get a whole bunch of modules. So I would check here first so that you know just how much you can upload. It's kind of like your budget, right, for your course resources. Now, some notes here on file storage. Student submissions don't count. Thankfully, because they will submit a lot of things. Studio videos will not count against this because that's a separate allocation. And that is monitored by MTSU at their level, not at your level. So don't worry about studio, is what I'm trying to say. I would also just, as a good habit, use links, right? Let's say like a link from a video that might be living in your OneDrive, for example, or your Microsoft account. Try not to upload large files, right? For one thing, it's going to make your course really hard to load. And that's going to impact you and it's going to impact students. And I'm just going to call up my own course content area for a minute. We STEM faculty love uploading big files. We love that. It's our bread and butter. We upload it and then students complain that their files will not open. Use links whenever possible to save on your course storage. And that will make your course easier to open. It makes the student experience more positive. It makes your life better because you are not impacted by slow load times. And then finally, that amount of storage that you have is regulated by MTSU, but I know you have really generous course storage limits, which is excellent. You don't have 500 megs, you have a lot more. And that's course statistics. Anything you want to ask about this area? All right. Now, the last area I want to show you here, again, it's in a place you wouldn't think there would be statistics, but it's here. And it is in modules. So I'm going to go backwards one. So inside of modules, you have a button called View Progress. And in View Progress, you'll see a list of all enrolled students and a list of all your modules. Now, just to give you some context, because I think that's important. Let's let this upload here. I said almost all my modules have requirements and prerequisites. This one doesn't. This one does. And that's key to using modules progress. If I had a course that had no requirements and no prerequisites, you will see module progression like this for every student. It will say complete all the way down. Because you did not institute requirements, Canvas assumes that the students saw everything, so it gives them the benefit of the doubt and says, yes, they looked at everything. Um, but in this case, because I did use requirements, Bruce, who is a go-getter in this class, he did do everything. So that's why everything is complete for him all the way down. Requirements, by the way, are these things like mark done, submit, mark done. So when I look at someone else, again, as long as you're using those requirements, you get a really good sense of where students are. So Troy has done everything in the first four modules because I know I set up requirements. In module 3, he has these things yet to do. And Canvas knows that because I have requirements set for all of them. Now he's able to open module 4, right? That's why it says unlocked, but he hasn't done anything in them yet. Otherwise, you'd see something like this instead. And this module here didn't have any requirements, which is why it's marking him off as complete. And then this last module is locked because he hasn't done the prerequisite to open this module. So he's locked out of this one. Yeah, great call out there, Lauren. They can track their own module progress. So they can see with little check marks and little red dashes if they've completed the thing or if they have not completed the thing. Now, because this can get quite long, right? I'm not assuming you have just 16 students in a class. I'd recommend that you just spot check. And at some point in the semester, there will be some students you have your eye on. So those are students that you're obviously checking up on quite a bit. But all in all, it gives you this really good idea of where students are at. And you can tell students do. Students, it's October. I expect that you are actively working in module number 10. And then you should be spot checking within the student progress area to see if they are really working through module 10. And that's module progress. Currently, this is the only way that we have to track progress through modules from the instructor level. However, we are working on some improvements to this. A progress bar, for instance, is in the works for each student, but it's not available today. All right, and that is course data. Take a big breath now. Okay, so is there anything you want to review, go over again, think about?
I have a question. Do you know of anything coming down the pike as far as more of a granular look at some of the things that we've talked about in the past?
Let's check our roadmap.
Because I, as well as most of our faculty, I've always been under the impression that it's better to have too much than not enough when it comes to being able to get down and look at what the students are doing, that kind of thing.
I understand. Admittedly, I'm running through this pretty quickly. Um, there's some admin stuff coming down the pike. New quizzes data in Canvas Data 2. Let's see what else. So just a kind of a quick glance at the roadmap here. I'm not seeing anything specific to course data and analytics for instructors. Oh, that's not it. Let me get a better link. That's what I meant. I'm wondering if the new collaborative roadmaps might be more helpful.
Well, I don't want to steal time if some of the faculty would like to ask questions.
Yeah, of course. Faculty, anybody, questions about the data that's here inside of Canvas?
I have a question about Ignite AI and how you see it possibly interacting with the data options that are available. We have the Ignite AI agent enabled for the moment. It's the little star in the upper right-hand corner. I was just curious if what y'all thought about if it could interact with some of those reports. Is it useful? Is that something that we should be considering using?
I'm thinking about Vicky's question about discussion data, and I'm wondering if Ignite Agent might be able to help with that. So I'm just going to scroll up and find Vicky's question. Mhm. Okay, overview for discussions that show you total number of posts. All right, let's find out. First, let me find a specific discussion because that would be relevant. Let's see, 1.9. Tell me the total number of discussion posts in the 1.9 discussion in Introduction to Business. Seems promising. So for folks that are wondering, what is this? Where did we go? You have a little star in the corner of your Canvas course when you open it. That's the Ignite agent. And the Ignite AI agent is available for you until June 30th. I think if there are any early adopters, folks that are teaching in Canvas right now, this would be very interesting to check. Oh, it's still thinking about it. Oh, 40 posts and replies. Actually, I just realized there's one other place where you can find the total. I'll go there in a minute. There's information about the discussion here. Let's see what else you were looking for, Vicky. Responses to classmates.
But can it break it down by individual?
Maybe? I'll leave this open while this is thinking about it. I just realized you can find the total number of posts. If you go to discussions, actually, the total number's right there, but it's counting initial replies as well as replies to students. It's not telling you like 20 are initial and 20 are replies to others. Uh-oh. It said I wasn't able to find the specific information. Jimmy, were you wondering if this could get you like number of replies by Bruce, number by Britta, number by etc.?
Yeah, I think that something like that would be helpful.
Number of discussion replies by each student in the introduction to business course. 4, and we'll be super specific. 1.9 week 1 discussion. I see this is specific to discussions. Are there other kinds of data you're looking for besides related to discussions? Oh, oh, it's still thinking.
If that was directed at me, no, I was just using your example. You pulled up Vicky's question, so I was just expanding on that because I know I would like to. And I hate to keep going back to D12 as an example, but that's what where we're at right now.
Mhm.
Um, D12 allows you to see, okay, well, there were this many replies, there were this many original posts, and break it down by this student had this many replies, this many views, that type thing. So as close to, and it just goes back to being able to see as much information as we can.
Right.
And if our faculty are used to being able to see all of that, I would like to give them an avenue to be able to see that as opposed to having to just go in and individually click on each student.
Yeah, this keeps on either hanging up or trying to run again. It's suggesting to manually count, which I know we don't want. If I went into, let's say, people, okay, so these are listing by specific Canvas item. So here's that discussion in particular. He submitted something twice. So he has 2 replies that he did on this date.
Could one of those be the original post and then one original
It's
reply,
not
or
specifying. Yeah, it's not specifying.
okay? So does the system, I guess, looking at this interface, does it give you um, a breakdown of what is the actual post versus replies, or does it just count everything as a reply?
I think it's counting everything as a reply. So It's probably his initial reply and reply to one other, but
Okay.
no guarantees. Also, this would necessitate you looking at each student,
Yeah.
right? If I need to look at Britta, I have to go access her report. Although I'm wondering if I can locate that in course analytics.
It would be nice that if on that screen there was a like a an arrow that you could choose the next student.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so you just click on an arrow.
Uh-huh.
Filter by date, section A, student. It's February the 14th. Oh, last 30 days. Dang it. But even so, when I look at course activity here, I'd see the name of the assignment. So the discussion title would be here. And it would tell you, yeah, it would tell you times viewed, times participated, but it's not going to break down as to the nature of the reply. So it would say two here for Bruce, but again, it wouldn't say one was a reply, one was the initial reply.
Okay.
Yeah. So the access report seems to me like that's the closest we can get to that, but it's not as granular at this moment when compared to D2L.
But when you're in SpeedGrader grading a discussion, it should show all of the things that Bruce would have posted, right? So
Correct.
SpeedGrader might, it's not, again, it's not uh, the full overall part, but um, SpeedGrader would have the individual as well.
Yeah, so again, we're looking at Bruce, right? Here's Bruce. Yeah. So he did here was his initial, here was his reply, but you'd have to go through each student. Well, at least you can see like the date when it was posted, but not when he saw it. So you could have seen the discussion board 20 times before his replies were registered.
And there's nothing on this page that says out of a total number of posts that was back on the discussion board page where you could see total, there was 40 replies to that discussion board.
Right.
This there's no place on SpeedGrader that says obviously there's three things here out of the 40 posts.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm. All right, let's check back on. No, it's still it's still thinking about it. I'm going to assume that it's not going to be able to tell me the discussion replies per student. At least not today. All right, we have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else you want to ask, share? All right, friends. You definitely deserve more than 5 minutes back, but I'm going to give you 5 minutes back. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to listen to me talk about data. If you would like to claim a badge that shows you have attended this training and you know the ways in which Canvas gathers data, you can claim that badge here or through claim code right here. It's a pleasure, Anne. Love seeing you. And if you enjoyed this session and you found it to be helpful, feel free to complete our training survey through the link there. You're looking for the only Helen in the list. Thanks so much for coming again. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you at a future training. I know I will.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, Karen
Helen. Bye,
or
everybody.
Helen.
Bye,
All right, bye,
everybody.
Helen.